Question 1. The company's record on dash the spread of anti-vaccination propaganda on its platforms is dash at best, though it has made some effort in the recent past to showcase reliable information on vaccines. So on these questions on the GRE, you are given 1, 2, or 3 blanks in a sentence. And when you have 2 or 3 blanks, then you have 3 options for each. And when you have a single blank in the sentence, you have 5 options. So this is a 2 blank text completion question. And in all such questions, you can guess the words that you would like to put into the blanks from the context of the question. So before we go to the options, we should try and think of what words can go in the blanks. So I'm saying here the company's record on, now obviously I'm looking at a verb here. The spread of anti-vaccination propaganda on its platform is dash at best. So this is the adjective for record. So this blank is an adjective, right? Though it has made some effort in the recent past to showcase reliable information on vaccines. Now, the connector is very important to understand the context, right? So I'm saying here that the company has made some effort to showcase reliable information in the recent past. But then I'm saying though here, which indicates contrast. So that means that the first half should present a negative opinion of the company when it comes to vaccine information, right? Because if I'm saying that it has made some effort in the recent past to showcase reliable information, but I'm putting that after though, which is a contrasting conjunction, then my first half should say that the company has not done so well when it comes to vaccine information in general. Now, if the company has not done so well when it comes to reliable vaccine information, then the spread of anti-vaccine propaganda is something that has happened on the company's platforms, and the company has not been able to control that, right? Because I'm looking at a contrast between reliable information on vaccines and anti-vaccine propaganda. So if the company has not had a good track record of showcasing reliable information in general, then it means that it has not been able to control the spread of anti-vaccine propaganda on its platforms, right? So if you look at these 3 options, I see controlling here. And this should be my answer because permitting and justifying would mean that the company is interested in anti-vaccine propaganda spreading on its platform. And that would not make sense because I'm trying to say that the company should not do that. The company should not permit that propaganda, right? So for the first blank, I like option C. But again, we can only confirm that once we have an answer for the second blank, because the sentence should read correct with both the blanks filled in. Now, I'm saying that the company needs to control the spread of anti-vaccine propaganda, and its record has not been great, right? Why would I say that? Because after that, I'm saying that in the recent past, it has improved its record somewhat, right? So for this second blank, I need to use a word which means that the company's record on controlling the spread of anti-vaccine propaganda has not been great. It has not been desirable, right? So the best answer for that would be spotty. Spotty is inconsistent. For example, even though the coal emitter has made pledges to reduce its carbon footprint, its record on the environment has been spotty, which is to say that its record has not been consistent. So that makes sense now. If you read the sentence with both these words, it says, the company's record on controlling the spread of anti-vaccine propaganda on its platforms is spotty at best, which is to say that the company has not been able to consistently control the spread of anti-vaccine propaganda. And we are saying that because the second half is saying, though it has made some effort in the recent past to showcase reliable information on vaccines. Now, for the second blank, I can't say remarkable, because if the company's record was remarkable, then the second half of the sentence wouldn't make sense. And dispassionate is not the correct word in this context. Dispassionate is impartial, neutral. For example, he took a dispassionate view of the conflict. So that doesn't make sense in the context of the company's record on controlling the spread of anti-vaccine propaganda. So for the first blank, it's C, and for the second blank, it's E. Question 2. So this is a one blank question, which is why you have 5 options. My garden plants know that autumn is approaching. Outwardly in full flower, they in their wood and leafy fibers move dash towards dormancy. So let's try and unpack this sentence, right? So the author is saying that autumn is approaching, and this is something that his or her garden plants know instinctively. Outwardly in full flower. Now, full flower is synonymous with spring or summer, right? And autumn is the start of the cold season. So when I say outwardly in full flower, that would indicate the opposite of autumn. That would indicate summer or spring, right? But at the same time, the first sentence is saying that the garden plant knows that autumn is approaching. So this outwardly is key to understanding the second sentence. So from the outside, when I look at the plant, it's in full flower, it's in full bloom. So it seems that autumn is not approaching. They, in their wood and leafy fibers, move dash towards dormancy. Now, dormancy is a state of hibernation, a state of not being active, which is what we associate winter with. When we talk about winter, we speak of plants and animals being dormant, not being active as they are in summer. So the second sentence has an inherent contrast that when you look at the plant from the outside, it still seems that there is summer, there is warm weather, but in their wood and leafy fibers, within the plant in its body understands that dormancy is approaching, autumn is approaching. So I need a word that could mean that the move towards dormancy is not noticeable to the naked eye, right? Because outwardly they are in full flower. Outwardly, it would seem that autumn is far away, but in their wood and their leafy fibers, they are moving towards dormancy. So which word captures this idea that this movement of the flowers, this movement towards autumn is not noticeable? Permanently, imperceptibly, irregularly, precariously, and relentlessly. So the right answer is option B. Imperceptibly is without being perceptible, without being observed or noticed, right? So if it is not perceptible, it's not noticeable. So even though the plants are in full flower outwardly, in their wood and leafy fibers, they move imperceptibly towards dormancy, right? It is something that you can't perceive. It is something that you can't see, but it's happening, right? Now, permanently is not right because permanently is something that won't change, right? That's fixed. And that's not what we are saying. It's not like their dormancy would be permanent. When spring comes, the flowers will bloom again. So it's not permanently. Irregularly is without a routine, without a regular rhythm. So that's not what we are saying here. That's not the context of the sentence. So it's not C. Precariously comes from precarious, and precarious is something that is uncertain, something that is on the verge of danger, something that you cannot rely on, right? For example, the bungee jumper stood precariously at the edge of the cliff before jumping. So that again doesn't make sense because the sentence is not speaking about danger. The sentence is speaking about something that is happening without it's being noticed, right? So it's not precariously. And relentlessly would mean something that happens without stop, right? For example, this company has a relentless drive to innovate, right? Which is to say that it works on innovation without stopping constantly, right? But here we are not looking at something that doesn't stop. We are looking at something that you can't notice. So it's not E. Question 3, the consultant's suggestion on eliminating a formal dress code met with dash from young employees, but didn't dash senior executives, resulting in the preservation of the sartorial status quo. So this is again a 2 blank sentence, and we have 3 options for every blank. So the sentence is saying that there was a consultant who was probably called in to speak about the dress code in an office, and he suggested that the formal dress code be eliminated, right? And this suggestion met with, now we need some response, some noun here, from young employees, but didn't dash senior executives. So this but, which is a contrasting conjunction, tells me that there was a contrast between the response of the young employees and the response of the senior executives, right? So the idea of eliminating a formal dress code met with some response from young employees and an opposite response from senior executives, resulting in the preservation of the sartorial status quo. Now, what does this mean? Preservation of the sartorial. Sartorial is related to how you dress, right? And status quo is the continuation of what was going before, right? When you don't change something, it's status quo. So if the status quo was preserved, it means that the formal dress code continues because the consultant had suggested that you eliminate it. And then there were responses to that suggestion from young employees and from senior executives. But ultimately, the formal dress code was retained. The sartorial status quo was preserved. Now, how do I choose options that indicate this contrast in the responses of the young employees and of the senior executives? So for the first blank, I have praise, condemnation, and humor. Now, I don't think humor fits the context, right? Because I can say that the young employees liked the idea or they did not like the idea, right? So I'm looking at words that indicate degrees of likeness. I'm not looking at words that indicate humor, right? So I don't like C right off the bat because it is somewhat irrelevant to the context. Now, between praise and condemnation, while both of them can go in terms of how the young people responded, I think condemnation is too strong in this context, right? If there is an option to eliminate a formal dress code, why would it be condemned, right? To condemn is to kind of be extremely critical of something or someone, right? And to almost push them to a corner, with your views or with your ideas. So that doesn't really fit the context of a dress code and your opinions on a dress code. So I'm leaning towards A for the first one, that there was a proposal to eliminate the dress code and it met with praise from young employees, right? Now, if this met with praise from young employees, and I know that the senior executives had an opposite response, then for the second one, I have options that say, but didn't hold a light to, didn't gain traction with, and didn't strive to engage. So for the second one, I like E because if I'm saying that this idea didn't gain traction with senior executives, I'm basically saying that they did not accept the idea of eliminating a formal dress code. This was something that they were not comfortable with. And then that makes sense because if the idea received praise from young employees but didn't gain traction with senior executives, then the idea was dropped because the senior executives thought that you should continue with a formal dress code. You should preserve the sartorial status quo. So therefore, I like gain traction with it. Now, to hold a light to something is to be comparable to something, right? In a good way. For example, the first part of the film was excellent, but the second part more than holds a light to the first one, which is to say that the first part was definitely better, but the second part was not too bad either, right? It holds a light to the first in the sense that it is able to kind of stand next to the first and be in the same category of being good, being acceptable, right? So that doesn't fit the context of how the senior executives responded to the idea of eliminating a formal dress code, right? You can't have the suggestion holding a light to the senior executives, right? Because when we say to hold a light to, we are talking about two comparable things. So it's not deep. And when would strive to engage make sense? For example, if I, as a person, strived to engage another person, it would mean that I would want to engage them in a conversation or to engage them in some activity, right? But I can't use this for a suggestion. A suggestion is an abstract thing. A suggestion cannot strive to engage senior executives, right? I could say the consultant strived to engage senior executives about his idea, but my subject is suggestion. So that is an abstract thing, and so that cannot strive to engage senior executives. So this is wrong in terms of the subject. So A for blank 1 and E for blank 2. Question 4. So this is a 3 blank sentence. While operating within China's system has always presented American companies with challenges, those have grown far more dash in recent years as US-China ties have dash, placing companies at risk of being dash. So again, we need to unpack the sentence, and we have this sort of first dependent clause, which we are completely given. There are no blanks there. And then in this second clause, there are 3 blanks that are given, right? So we really need to understand what's happening before we attempt the sentence. Now, I'm saying that operating within China's system has always presented American companies with challenges, right? So this obviously comes from the geopolitical situation between the US and China. China is a communist state and it has state capitalism. So if an American company wants to invest there, it needs to follow the rules of the Chinese Communist Party. So that is the challenges that we are talking about. That to operate within China's system has always presented American companies with challenges. But then I'm saying while, which obviously is a contrasting conjunction. So while that has always been true, those challenges have grown far more dash in recent years. So there have always been challenges, but those challenges have grown far more. So I'm looking for a word that indicates that those challenges have grown far more difficult, far more severe, far more intense, right? Because I'm saying that the degree of those challenges has increased. So in the first blank of these 3 words, acute would make sense. Because if I'm saying that those challenges have grown far more acute, I'm saying that the severity, the intensity of those challenges has increased, right? So for the first one, acute makes sense. Now, innocuous is innocent, right? For example, it was an innocuous plan to cheer the boss, right? So that doesn't make sense in the context of challenges becoming more intense. And I can't use experienced for challenges, right? I can use experienced for a person, but I can't say that challenges have grown far more experienced. Now, those challenges have grown far more acute in recent years as US-China ties have. Now, why would the challenges become more acute? Obviously, because the ties between the two countries have deteriorated, right? They are not the same as they were earlier. So I'm looking for a word that indicates decline, that indicates deterioration, right? Now, among these three words, frayed would make sense, right? To fray is to strain. So I'm saying that the ties have strained. The ties between US and China are not the same as they were earlier, right? So frayed makes sense. To ameliorate is to make better, right? For example, the medicine helped ameliorate his distress, which is to say that his distress reduced, right? His situation improved. So that doesn't make sense because I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying that the ties have worsened, right? And to exacerbate is to make worse, but exacerbate is used for an issue or a problem, right? For example, your shouting at the meeting exacerbated the conflict, which means that it made the conflict worse. But I can't use exacerbated for ties. I'm talking about relations. I'm saying that the relations have frayed. The relations are not as good as they were earlier. So even though exacerbate means to become worse, it doesn't fit the context of ties. And so frayed is better. So I'm saying that the challenges have grown far more acute in recent years as US-China ties have frayed, placing companies at risk of being. So now I'm talking about the effect of these frayed ties on companies, American companies looking to invest in China. So placing companies at risk of being a soft touch, of being caught in the middle, of being brought to task. So here option H would make the most sense because if I'm saying that these companies are looking to invest in China, but the ties between the two countries have worsened, then companies are at the risk of being caught in the middle of these two countries. So H makes sense. Now, a soft touch. A soft touch is used to describe a person who is gullible, who is vulnerable, somebody you can dupe easily. For example, Dave agreed to finish Jeremy's work because he's a soft touch, which is to say that Jeremy asked Dave to do it and Dave did not resist, right? He agreed. So that doesn't make sense, obviously, because I'm not talking about companies readily agreeing to do something. I'm saying that companies are at risk of being caught in this sort of conflict between US and China. So it's not G. And to be brought to task is to be scolded or reprimanded for something wrong that you have done. Now, it could happen that the companies are reprimanded by the American administration, but I think H is a better option than I because here we are not talking about the scope or the prospect of being scolded by the American government. Here I'm talking about how companies that invest in China are at risk of being caught in the middle of this conflict because of a worsening of ties between America and China. So brought to task might have made sense in another context of a particular example of a company doing something that the government of the US doesn't agree with. But in this context, option H would be better.